Greetings and welcome to the Halloween edition of the Sliders Review. And I'm here today to talk to you about Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed. This came out in 2004. And I'm just so conflicted about this movie. Is it terrible? No. Is it great? No. Is it bad? No. Is it good? No. It's just mid. It's just all right. But it's not as fun or memorable as the very first one. It's actually pretty forgettable and everything. And I'm conflicted because I remember years ago when it came out, I watched it. And I remember it didn't do so well with the critics and stuff. And so, like, I had a bad taste going in my mouth when I watched it. And then I watched it and I didn't particularly like it. Like, I could see where the criticism was made. Then, many years later, I rewatched it again. I was all like, you know what? It's not that bad. Then it's like I rewatched it again. And it's just kind of like, I understand the criticism of this movie and why I felt the way I did, like both times. It's just a mid movie. It did not have that same magic as the first, which is very odd because it still is written by James Gunn and still directed by Raja and stuff. And that was Gosnell and stuff. Like, yeah, Raja Gosnell. And it's just kind of like, so what the heck happened? Well, one of the things that happened was fan criticism of the first movie. Yes. Whenever something is not the way fans want it, they complain, and rightfully so. And so because of that, it caused them to do like a course correction and stuff. And it caused the studio to probably interfere and stuff to make it a little bit more Scooby-Doo-ish. Because one of the criticisms of the first movie was it didn't really feel like Scooby-Doo. And that is a valid point. As good as the first one is, as like, comedic, it was way too bright, colorful, and comedic. It really didn't feel that much like Scooby-Doo, even though it kind of did. Like, it was just too vibrant and just the humor and like the color and the atmosphere. So they kind of tried to bring a bit more down to what Scooby-Doo was about. Dull kind of colors, them doing more detective stuff, which there was detective stuff in the first one. It just wasn't that much. It was just little snippets here and there and a whole lot of humor and stuff. And a whole lot of coincidences just like happening. But the second one was jam-packed with like detective work. They also went back to the drawing board and brought back the original monsters from the original series. And, so what the heck happened exactly? It had a little bit more of that jury, like, dim color, like the cartoon series. It had the monster costumes from the original series. It had the cast from the first movie. It had the writer and the director. Well, it's weird. It's like they gave us less and gave us more of like a good thing. Like, that's what's so bizarre about this movie. It's like an enigma or something like that. It's a weird entity and everything. It's just a huge, like, mystery and stuff, a riddle. And it's just kind of like, how do you give us less of a good thing and also give us more of a good thing at the same time? And, I think trying to blend the two, like if you're gonna make something, you kind of gotta stick with your guts and everything of how you made the original. That's what Paul S. Anderson did with his Resident Evil series. He tried his own thing, but then he started incorporating more of the game, and it just felt weird. Now, when it comes to that of like Raja, I have no idea who this man is, and I have decided for this video to look him up. He has a bit of a, it's hard to say. He has like a kind of iffy, like movie resume and stuff. He makes a lot of comedy, kiddish type movies and stuff, and he also makes a lot of stuff that are like, with like, I think, what was it, Beverly Hills Chihuahua or something like that, something else with dogs. He did both the first two Smurf movies. He did, I want to say, one of the Home Alone movies. I think the third one, I think. And so, like, his resume is just kind of like up there, you know what I'm saying? Like a little up in the air, because a lot of those movies he did didn't do so well, or they had a lot of criticism, like the Smurf movies. I've never seen those movies. And one reason why I don't want to see it is because I don't want another Transformers or Alvin and the Chipmunks where it's constantly tons of humans in the movie instead of your main characters. And that's kind of how those first two Smurf movies looked in the trailers. I didn't watch it. Those movies even got rebooted into like a third movie, and that didn't do so well. And so, yeah, he doesn't make that many movies. He edits a lot of stuff. Not saying he's bad or nothing like that, because, he did make, a really good Scooby-Doo movie and a pretty decent Scooby-Doo movie. It's just, he's not exactly like, the best. And James Gunn's just a giant man child with beady eyes and his pedal like jokey ways and everything. He was supposed to write and direct the third movie. And of course, the second movie, it made a lot of money, just not as much as the first. See, this is what's so weird about the budget. The budget of the first movie was 84 million. It made 273 million. This movie, the budget is sketchy. Wikipedia has it as 20 million to 80 million. So what exactly was the actual budget? But it only made like 181 million, not as much as the first. And so with the lack of budget, and also, like, a problem with this movie is that they filmed in Australia in the first one. And this one they filmed in Canada. And the music is different in this movie. The music in the first movie was on fire. Like, it was just insane. There are still beats that I can remember till this day. I decided to go look it up and re-listen to the stuff. And some people in the comment section was all like, this one song give me like chills and it spooks me out. And I've been having nightmares, blah, blah. I'm like, it ain't that scary, but it's memorable. That's the thing. The music in this second movie, you will forget it in a heartbeat. And, it's just like really insane. And then not only that, but there are two Canadian actors who are younger in this movie who are bigger stars now and had like tiny roles. One dude went on to play Jack in SPD, the Red Ranger, and Slasher the first season. And the other guy, he's been in a bunch of stuff. I just can't remember what it is he's been in. And like, they didn't really do nothing with those guys. And so the humor also is all over the place in the movie. Now, it was all over the place in the first movie, but at least it was funny. The humor in the second movie can sometimes get a bit cringy. Like, Scooby and Shaggy was the best things of the first movie. Velma is the best thing of the second movie. Because Shaggy and Scooby was so like well received in the first movie, they wrote them way more stuff in the second, and they kind of overdid it with the humor with these guys. Like, it's just, okay, first of all, Scooby and Shaggy don't really eat nothing in this movie. They're not obsessed about food. There's no hint of, like, Scooby snacks whatsoever, which is bizarre because that's their main thing, Also, like, there's a scene where Scooby starts drinking these like formulas and stuff, these chemicals, and they start transforming him and Shaggy. Shaggy at one point turns into a woman, which is probably gonna age very poorly now. with a lot of like, transgender rights and all this other stuff. And then he transforms into like a buff dude. But each transformation is just over the top and overacted and stuff. And Matthew Lillard's a really funny, great actor, but sometimes he can go a bit over the top. And because they wanted him to be more humorous, he does go over the top, especially when he's the buff dude. He doesn't even want to turn back because he's so buff. Scooby, on the other hand, turns into some weird alien slug looking thing, and then he turns into like an Albert Einstein type person. And he is the one who deduces, like, how to like fix them and stuff. Then there's like a scene, I forgot what it was about, but it was just a weird scene. Because these two guys are supposed to be scaredy cats, but when they're running from the monsters, they literally jump off a cliff and start skateboarding, snowboarding like down with just like lids of a trash can. And it's a huge mountain and they're just like surfing down it. And it's kind of like how these two dudes are supposed to be cowards and everything. And not only that, but the personalities are slightly different in this movie. I'm all for character development, but it was just kind of weird how they went a 180 on like Daphne and that of Fred again. One of the criticisms about the first movie was that Daphne and Fred don't really act the way they do in the older cartoons. Daphne acts a little bit more like a pup named Scooby-Doo. Fred kinda, but not really. And so Fred was very arrogant and snobbish in the first movie and an idiot. And in the second movie, he's less of an idiot, a little bit more competent, less preppy, and he actually has like a brave hero moment. But it just kind of comes out of nowhere. He wasn't even questioning himself. That's the weird thing. When he's going up against the Black Knight, they have a joust. He's on a motorcycle, the Black Knight's on a horse, and they joust. The thing is, there was nothing in question of his bravery or his leadership. So why did he just randomly do it? The only reason why is because this news reporter kept filming him out of context and airing what he's saying, and he was saying a bunch of dumb stuff like he hates the town and stuff like that. But there's still no reason as to why he did the whole joust thing. That's more of a bravery thing and not trying to save your reputation. Like, you know what I'm saying? And then Daphne, her criticism of the first movie was that she was super whiny and she just all of a sudden knew martial arts because the actress was Buffy. And so in this movie, she's more competent, more smart, and at times she acts more like the leader than that of Fred. And not only that, but she still does the whole Buffy fighting thing with like swords and this and that. Even the whole Hercules and Xena thing where they stomp the ground and their weapon flies up in the air and they catch it with their hand. And it's just weird. But in the first movie, it was weird, but in a hilarious kind of way. Here it's just weird and everything. But she's less whiny, she's more smart and stuff. And then there is the fashion sense again. The fashion sense is the same exact way it was in the first movie, but yet they're in the modern day. They dress like they're back in the 70s and the 80s, and it's really weird and bizarre. It has been stated they are in fact adults because Shaggy said he went to college at one point. And so they're adults, but for whatever reason in the year of 2004, they're dressing like they're in the 70s. And once again, Fred and Daphne are the only ones allowed to change up their outfits for the most part. Velma, once again, is wearing the same exact outfit every stinking day. She only modifies it slightly at times, especially when she's wearing that leather outfit. But other than that, she's always wearing her exact same outfit along with that of Shaggy. Every once in a while, he'll modify it for a special occasion, but he wears the exact same outfit he wore in like the first movie. Green shirt, the corduroy, like brown pants and stuff. Only this time, they all wear their iconic outfits, kinda. Well, Velma and Shaggy does in the beginning, and the other two wear like a modified version. But then later on in the movie, Shaggy now wears like a long sleeve white shirt underneath his green shirt. And it's still weird. I'm assuming it was a mandated thing that the studio did not want their costumes like altered whatsoever. Because that's what they did with Batman and stuff. And Scooby looks absolutely the same. I do like this design of Scooby. It's a nice live action design adaptation, but he does not look like Scooby-Doo. But the same voice actor comes back, and in my opinion, is one of the best. And so, like, what is it? Other than that, his personality is relative the same as last time, but he's not as scared. It's still scare him as Shaggy? Not really. Velma is still really smart, but this time she's crushing on a guy played by Seth Green. Also, let's talk about the star power. In the first movie, they had that legendary actor who played Bean. Then they had that other actor who's been in like a million different things, sitcoms in like America. And then they had Sugar Ray. And so, like, even myself, I've never watched a Bean movie, but I know who the guy is. Like, I've seen him, like, the trailers and stuff like that. Coming into this movie, the star power is still there. It's just some people I don't really recognize. Like the older cast that plays like all the villains. I don't recognize none of those people, but they are legendary actors and stuff. And so it's kind of like, how are young kids supposed to really know who they are, or even young adults? The older ones probably will, but I sure didn't. And then there's Seth Green and Alicia Silverstone. Now, I know both of them. Now, younger kids are not going to know who the heck they are. But like people around my age would, because, Seth Green's been in like everything, and he was in Buffy. And Alicia Silverstone was in Clueless and Batman and Robin. And even though they are like big names, they're not as big as the two guys from the first movie. Then there's the band. I have no idea who this band is. And like, then like there's Ruben Studdard at the end of like the movie, and I know who he is and stuff. But Ruben kind of disappears every once in a while, and you kind of forget. Everybody from American Idol kind of disappears from time to time. Like, seriously, why are those shows still around? Nobody's becoming famous. Like, Kelly Clarkson is probably the most uber famous person from that show. And then there's a couple of others that are just scattered, like famous, semi-famous and stuff. But other than that, nobody really becomes famous and stay famous that long. Not even like the other people in it. And don't even get me started on The Voice. Who the heck is famous from The Voice? Have you ever heard any of those people who won like the show that made it big? I've never have and everything. So that reality show is just for the celebrity judges, just so they can make some money and they can be relevant, which is just a shame. Get rid of reality TV. And so, like, let's see, some other topics before I get into the actual plot. Oh, the motivation. So, like, okay. The motivation of the first movie is pretty apparent. Like, the gang broke up. This guy invited them to an island because the people who leave there act very different than the way they come there, like brainwashing. So he hired them, and they took on the case. And then it led to them discovering monsters for the first time in the world, instead of just people in costumes. Then that led to Scrappy-Doo and everything. And it's just like one thing after another kept pushing the plot as to why they was there. You know what I'm saying? And it was a pretty legit villain. Like they did the classic, a person in a mask. And then it turned out to be Scrappy-Doo. And then he turned into like an Uber Scrappy-Doo. And the villain actually had like a motive. He hated like Mystery Inc. He wanted them dead, and he hates everybody for hating him. And so he had an actual motive and everything, And the monsters, while silly looking, they were still somewhat pretty evil and everything. The CGI wasn't all that great, but it was all right. Here, on the other hand, it's very confusing confusing. Like, okay, Mystery Inc. really doesn't have no real motive that like push their story forward other than like there's a museum, there's still celebrities and everything. And it turns out there's a real ghost that shows up, like a real monster ghost type thing. So, because of that, they trashed the museum by mistake because you know how Shaggy and Scooby are. And so, because of that, they look like buffoons. And then after that, the news reporter lady keeps like, um, making it seem like they're worse than what they are. So now everybody in the world is turning on them for some strange and bizarre reason. And that's weird because they're literally like celebrities and everything. And so, because of that, of course, they're going to try to figure out how these monsters came. Because the monster is actually taking the form of the costumes of the criminals from the past. And so, one thing, so, okay, so yeah, them trying to figure that out, that's motivation. But it was just a random occurrence, somewhat, you know what I'm saying? But then this is the weird thing. They find something called random odium or something like that. It's kind of like a toxic ooze, kind of ghostly like. Velma recognizes it and they've dealt with it in the past. But here's the problem with all that. That chemical is kind of ghostly and monstrous kind of thing, but it's a chemical nevertheless. And it's kind of like, they didn't know nothing about ghosts back in the day. And so that's just weird that this chemical is like there and it's kind of ghostly. But it helps bring the costumes to life when you mix it with other chemicals, I guess, or whatever. And so, but it's still a ghostly magical thing, but yet they didn't know nothing about that stuff until the first movie. And so, in traditional like Scooby-Doo fashion, you only have a few suspects, one or two, no, about two or three. And so we don't really have no like characters really, other than Heather, played by Alicia Silverstone, who's like the news lady or whatever. And then you have Seth's character, who is the curator at the museum. Now, all signs point to him because he has an outburst and acts kind of thuggish around these guys. But he says, man, when you're somebody like me, you gotta act tough and everything, or they'll take advantage of you. But either way, he's the primary suspect. But another primary suspect is the person in the pterodactyl costume from years ago. Jacob Moe or something like that. But he is presumably dead after falling off a building. And so we get to meet all the classic monsters from back in the day, just in their ghostly form. And they're all acting silly. Not one of them is scary in the slightest way. So why is Mystery Inc. like terrified of them? And so, but they're acting gooberish and stuff, right? Then we get to see the people who used to be behind the mask at a bar that a bunch of criminals work at. Those are the older cast I told you about, but none of them are the voice actors from back in the day. So it's kind of a bummer. And so, like, of course, they blame them because that's what they do. Now, if you really want to think about this movie, it reminds you a bit more of a pup named Scooby-Doo. And also, because now they're public enemy number one, because of acting like buffoons and everything, and people think they're the reasons why all these monsters have showed up, which that's not no explanation. So there's no logic to that. Now, they do have a modern day headquarters. Their modern day headquarters is very colorful and bright, and there's some technology that is updated, but it's kind of like an old fashioned way, and just slightly. Because one of the things I thought was weird that they didn't never use no technology in the first movie that was modern. So after they can't go back there, they go to their old hideout, which is a clubhouse. And the clubhouse is the exterior I don't recognize, but the interior is similar to that of a pup named Scooby-Doo in their headquarters in the treehouse. So that was kind of cool and everything. And it's a lot of old technology. We see an old picture of when they was in high school. It should have been middle school instead of high school because they looked a little young in that picture. And we get a flashback of them playing frisbee. Not solving the crime, but just playing frisbee. So there's a subplot in here with Shaggy and Scooby, is that they overheard the gang talking bad about them about how they're like goofballs and everything and mess everything up. So those two want to prove themselves that they're brave and strong and they can solve a case. So they go about it on their own. Only problem is every clue that like they find out has nothing to do with the overall clue of what the movie is about and stuff. They're just randomly going out to see bad guys and finding this and that, but it has nothing really to do with the story. Anywho, after they all like, gang back up again, the monsters chase them down, they defeat the monsters and everything. Scooby defeats them. But it's weird because, even though Scooby and Shaggy are goofballs who mess everything up, they always end up saving the day, especially like Scooby and everything. So Scooby saves the day again, right? Now, there is a bad person in this movie that's brand new. This person right here, this is our primary villain, but this person just pops in and out the movie 3 times. They're not doing anything villainous other than standing like in one spot and shouting a bunch of like villainous stuff, and then they run away. Not much of a villain. The villains that chase everybody around are the monsters from back in the day. So this villain's not even captured by the gang. The villain actually slips and catches themselves. So they unmask the villain. And who is it? Alicia Silverstone character. Why did she do what she did? Why did she bring the costumes to life and turn them into monsters? Why did she try to like ruin Mystery Inc.? I don't know. And it's never explained. She just did it for the sake of doing it. But guess what? It's another twist. It's a mask within a mask. Alicia Silverstone character Heather is not even a real woman. They ripped that mask off and it's the original pterodactyl ghost person in the costume, that Jacob mode person that presumably died. He faked his death. And so he's all like, I would have got away with it too. It wasn't for you kids. But get away with what? He didn't try to steal nothing. He didn't try to take over the world. He just wanted to ruin their reputations. But the only reason why that happened is because they wrecked the museum and everything. And he altered like footage of like Fred talking that took out of context. So for the good part of 10, 15, 20 years, he's been posing as a woman. Okay, James Gunn. And then there's a scene where his camera guys, his accomplice, and those two cuddled, and he had no idea he was a woman. Okay, James Gunn. So we don't have a clear-cut motive for like the villain. The villain is just there for whatever reason. And it's just kind of like, even the Cartoon Network movies had a more believable villain plot than what they had in this. So this is just kind of sad, you know what I'm saying? And this is supposed to be the sequel to your movies. What the world, James Gunn? Like there's no motivation truly for the villain and everything. Unless it's just ruin their reputation, big whoop. Like big whoop and everything. And it's just kind of like, it's just a sad, pathetic plot. Like it really is and stuff. And the way Scooby like defeated the monsters is that like he froze them with like a fire extinguisher. Now, as for the CGI, it's kind of like the first one. At times it's good and at times it's bad. However, the monsters do look extremely good. Like they look very, very good. Except for the pterodactyl. Sometimes he looks a bit off. But some of the CGI, you can tell it looks pretty like CGI. The beginning of the movie opening is very flat, dull, and boring as opposed to the first one. It's basically just a CGI city and it's going all around the city and you see the pterodactyl flying around. It's dull, it's boring, it looks like it's out of a video game. Scooby is hit and miss just like he was in the first. If he's in the daytime, he looks terrible. If he's at night, he looks a whole lot better. So at least the CGI looked better, but the blob monster, tar monster, is kind of bad looking, especially when he interacts with the humans. You can really tell they're on a green screen and everything. Then I haven't even gotten about the hair. The hair does not look good in this movie whatsoever. Like, Fred is wearing a wig and it's pretty noticeable. And he has shaggier hair again, like in the beginning of the first movie, until he cut it. Freddie Prinze Jr. did not want to dye his hair again because he was pretty pissed at how he was treated in the first movie, to the point where he said he'll never do another Scooby-Doo movie again. Velma is wearing the exact same wig as she wore in like the first movie. When she has the longer, shaggier hair that's close to her shoulders, as opposed to the shorter hair she had in the second part of the first movie. It's a little too shaggy. I don't remember her hair being that shaggy. But speaking of shaggy, his hair is way too long in this movie. They do look like they came out the 70s. Yes, I'll give them that. But it doesn't really look like the way, like, it did in the first, like the good hair and stuff. And plus, Shaggy's hair has always been a little too long in both these movies. And Daphne is pretty much just Daphne and her hair and everything. I think Sarah wore like a wig this time, and it looks more wiggish than like her normal hair and stuff. And that's just about it. So while it's not a terrible movie, it's not great, and it's not as cool and fun as like the first. And the music choices aren't that great in this movie. It's weird because it's a little bit darker in terms of color, and I never thought I would miss that bright color palette of like the first, but I do. And it's just, I don't know, man, the fun one, because the fun one was a true adaptation of an older property in a very early 2000s kind of way, like Charlie's Angels. But with this one, it just feels like the life has been sucked out of it. Like it really just does. Also, all the adult humor from the first movie is completely gone in this movie. Both movies has a PG rating, not even a PG-13. And so, like, I'm sure that the parents were still pissed at James Gunn for the first movie. So Warner Brothers is all like, look, this is a kids thing. Make it like, like kiddish in their thing. Because there are no adult jokes except for one weed reference and stuff. And that's about it. Oh, one more thing I wanted to point out before I wrap this up was how they deduce Heather slash Jacob Mo was like the bad person, because there's nothing that really suggests that it was Heather other than her, like, making the group look bad, but that's only because they did something stupid to look bad. And so, but there was nothing, and I mean nothing, that could have tied her to all this crap that's going on. All the detective work they did not lead to nothing. They did not find out she's a scientist. They did not find out she's into like magical stuff. They did not find out that she could be related to anybody. It was just the most random thing because she's one of the main stars of like the movie. And as for Jacob Mo, they found out he is still alive because they found a picture of him near like a museum when he was supposed to be dead when it was constructed. So that part made sense, but as to how he could be her made absolutely no sense whatsoever. So they kind of went for that random, like, oh, we figure out the, like, the monster person. But, back in the day, they actually had reasoning as to why they suspected somebody was like the monster person. A footprint, some sawdust, like something, like a part of the material, like something, you know what I'm saying? And here, it just made absolutely no sense. And, there was footprints with the, that green oozy stuff, like the that chemical crap, but they didn't like put the footprints near anybody to see if it matched up or nothing like that. It was just the most random thing ever. And it's just like, kids are not that dumb. Definitely adults are not that dumb. That wasn't that spooky. All right, well, I shall talk to y'all later. Bye.